Good afternoon, everyone. I'll not be speaking so much about the open schooling and the distance learning per se, but I'd like to introduce the efforts which our ministry is doing on developing the national vocational education qualification framework for the country. And that's where the role of NIOS will also fit in. So why do we need a NVEQF? I want to stress on the E also, because the Indian workforce is largely unorganized sector, informal employment, and this covers almost 93 to 94%. And these are the people who also have low levels of literacy and numeracy. So it is very important that this vocational sector is embedded in the education system. So that because right now, with the amount of awareness and things which even a rural boy has, he aspires to go in for certain amount of degree and increase in his qualification as such. So that is why it is imperative that the vocational education is embedded, any skill training, any skill development is embedded in the education system. The child gets vocational skills also, as well as a simultaneous school, college, university degree. That is why, and also this will enable it to have a sort of a linkage between general education and vocational education, which is one of the basic lacuna in our system right now. This is a brief sort of the scenario which we are in right now. 5.54 crore children in the elementary levels, which goes down to 2.89 at secondary levels, and which is even more dropouts at the high secondary level. So here we know that maybe the education is not relevant to a child from his economic or cultural perspective. Most of the children, they do not go in for vocational education because vocational is thought to be little less, I mean the credibility is not that much as for a general education. Even though after a proper vocational education, his employability would increase. But still today, because education and vocational is two separate compartments, the parents may not like their children to go in for vocational education because he doesn't get a degree at the end of his studies. So these are all the barriers which we want to break now. This is the demand-supply mismatch. But in the age group of 15 to 29, only 2% of the persons have gone for formal vocational training. It could be as high as 70 to 90% in some of the developed countries. Then 93%, as I said, is in the unorganized sector. The new entrants every year is 12.8, but our present capacity of skill development is 3.1 million only. And this skill development capacity is spread over, if we talk about Government of India, across 17 ministries. And each ministry has its own very relevant courses, but they are not linked, they are not supported, they are not under a common national standards. With the result that the child has very low mobility. A child studying in Bihar cannot get employment in Maharashtra with that certificate because the industry in Maharashtra may not recognize his level of qualifications. So these are all the things we want to address when we are working on the NVQF. This is, if we compare Indian standards with the global scenario, even our national policy, in fact, if we go back to the Kothari Commission also, they spoke about vocational education, followed by the 1986 National Policy on Education, which again targeted 25% of the children going in for vocational education by 2000. But unfortunately, because of these deficits in our systems, we've been able to manage only about 4.8% of our higher secondary students going into vocational courses. Now, this would be a repetition of what I've already said. There is lack of uniformity in qualifications. If you take one course, one trade, in fact, across the country, there'll be innumerable organizations offering it. The periodicity of the courses will differ. The kind of training which is imparted will differ. It's a whole range, a whole spectrum. Then there is a lack of clear recognized pathways of learning. I mean, ITI is different, Polytechnic is different, higher secondary is different, and there is no sort of a connectivity between a child who's gone into an ITI if he aspires for a higher education. There are certain states which have given options of some sort of a leverage of children coming from polytechnics getting direct admission into engineering colleges in second year. But again, these are sporadic efforts across the country, but there is no standardized uniform approach across the country. Then most important is there's a lack of horizontal and vertical mobility. Vocational courses are usually a dead end. A polytechnic student, an ITI student, that's the end of it. And he maybe gets expertise in one course. And later on, if that course becomes redundant, as today the technology is changing so fast, that lots of courses are becoming redundant and they have to be retrained. But if he's gone through an ITI, it's a dead end for him, he can't go up. Polytechnics, similar thing. So there is no vertical mobility. Hence, the charm of going into vocational education also decreases for the child who aspires to have, greater education levels. Then horizontal mobility between general education and vocational is almost non-existent. Today, if my child does higher secondary in vocational and he wants to go into a general BA or BSc course, it's very difficult. Then we've got a whole history of culture of really great craftsmen and artisans, but there is no system of a recognition of their informal learnings. So this is another sector which is woven into the NVQF. And the entire education system would be based on competency levels and not just on rote learning. So this is what we plan. We've got about 10 levels, starting from class 9 to class 10. Up till now, the thought was, the programs for vocational started in class 11 onwards. But now when we're having discussions with states and other stakeholders during the development of the NVQF, everyone has been wanting it to start from class 9. So class 9 and 10 will be sort of a pre-vocational, because up to, like with the Right to Education Act, up to 14, it's a fundamental right of the child to be in school. But what recently has been decided is that this would be taken up to to 16 years. So we would really not want a child to go into the workplace at that young an age. Because if you see other countries also, basically, largely they've been introducing vocational courses at the age of 16, 18. France is a very low, it introduces it at 11 years. But we want to introduce it at 9, 10, and then the formal certification starts from class 11 onwards. And then, correspondingly, there would be different bodies for accrediting these levels and the courses. Now, these are some of the problems which we are trying to address through and I'll just go through the salient features of the NVQF. Now, here what we want to do is do away with the do away with the annual exam system and go into the semester system, where till now there is